The Lost Cryptids Conservatory, where we will shatter your reality to bring you closer to the truth.
All right, guys, welcome back to another live show of the Lost Cryptids Conservatory. We have an awesome guest today, Mr. Jim Sherman. He's a local Michigan BFRO researcher and the creator of the YouTube channel, Lord Cryptid. How you doing, Jim?
Oh my goodness, this is probably one of the best days of the year for me because it was my last day as a teacher for the year, and so I have my summers off. And so I graded my last final exam, and it's a good feeling. Track is over, school is over, and now I just have like some real live time frankly, just to relax. It's been kind of a crazy year for teaching, but this is a really good way to start the beginning of my summer. This is pretty exciting for me.
I don't know what just happened. My phone just messed up. That's what the technical issues of StreamYard. Sometimes I think we're getting zapped on here. The show sometimes.
Someone may not want us
Let's try this
talking
again,
about
though,
this
real
stuff.
quick, guys. All right.
All right.
That's going to work.
I think that's going to work. All right, sorry for that, folks. Technical difficulties. Anyways, Jim, what got you started in your quest for the elusive Bigfoot? And
For what got me involved in this silliness is really what it is. I'll tell you. Here's the deal, and probably similarly to many folks out there, when I was young, watching Leonard Nimoy, In Search of, and Peter Graves, and I used to love those TV shows. Anything that had to do with anything that was weird, ghosts, UFOs, Loch Ness Monster, that kind of stuff was fascinating to me. And then the Bigfoot thing just kind of caught me because I grew up in the Portage area near Kalamazoo, and back behind our house there was this big woods, and having the woods back there made me think that there could be a Bigfoot back there. And so I always had this just weird fascination with anything that was just odd. But it wasn't until much later when I was probably, my goodness, I was heading into college, that I had a weird experience in the woods that freaked me out to the point where I was so deathly afraid of being in the woods that I just wouldn't go anymore. And I just stopped. And I grew up camping. I mean, that's what we did. My dad would get 2 weeks off and we'd go camping. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Everyone else is like, let's go to Florida and like doing really cool things. And we went camping, but I loved it. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I grew up hunting. fishing. Like a feral child. I was in the woods all the time, and that's just where I was comfortable. If I wasn't in the woods, I was biking or fishing. But after this experience that happened to me many, many years ago, I stopped going in the woods because it just scared me so much. Did you want to hear about it?
Well, yes, of course, Jim. You tell us.
Well, here's the deal. It's I just happened to be out camping with my dad, and we went to this place. It's in the Upper Peninsula, and it is south of Munising. And there's an area where you can canoe in and hike in and things like that. And we did this, and the fishing was amazing. Everything was just perfect. Loons, beaver. It was just a great trip. First night, no worries. It's late. Fire dies down. Dad goes to sleep. He sleeps immediately, snoring, which kept me up a little bit more. But the issue was I could hear something that was coming up behind me. Like there was something back there, and there was nothing back there. And I know what deer sound like. I know what I know what animals sound like. And this, initially I was convincing myself it was like, oh, I'm sure it's just a chipmunk, or I'm sure it's just, a raccoon or something that's not going to consume me. But as it was approaching, it was getting louder and louder, and it was starting to hit leaves and branches that were a lot higher than what I would have expected an animal to hit. Because I'm laying on my back, kind of looking up, and it's coming from this direction. And it was as if it were a person. Initially, I thought maybe it was a deer with antlers, and that could maybe reach up high enough to be hitting those branches, because I'd been back there, and that was odd. Frankly, it sounded as if a person was slowly walking toward me and doing this, brushing the branches, just because it was pretty high. And I even checked it later to make sure I wasn't making it up. But here I am, absolutely petrified in a tent, and whatever it is behind me gets close enough that I can hear it breathing. And that was disconcerting, because it makes you think, I'm like, okay, it's probably a bear. Bear's not going to bug me. Everything's going to be fine, because it wasn't a deer. It just didn't quite fit. But then it pushed something up against the back of the tent. And that was odd, because what it pushed against the tent was not a deer hoof or something like that. It wasn't a bear paw. It was big, and frankly, it looked like a big hand pressing up against the back of the tent. Now, granted, I can't see it because it's through, through this blue nylon, but that's kind of what it looked like to me. And so I'm trying to figure out, I'm like, is this a bear's paw? And so I was absolutely petrified, to the point where I could not get up and move if I had wanted to. Just couldn't. I had nothing to defend myself. I was just in a sleeping bag, and all I could really do was reach up and kind of hit this object. And I remember I was trying to be loud and scary, like, gotta freak out the bear. And it probably came out like a or something like that. I probably sound like a sick sick chipmunk or something. But I tried to be loud, and whatever was behind me, I'm going from sound because I couldn't see it, seemed like it made like a huff, which initially made me think bear, but then it stood up and hit branches that were really high up there, and like hit the leaves. And I'm just like, oh. And then it didn't do what a bear would do in that situation. A bear would just like a bulldozer, just run away, and you would know. This thing must have turned around. I didn't see it turn around. Must have turned around and then bipedally walked away. And so then in my brain, I'm like, what the heck is this thing? Because I thought it was an animal. sounded like an animal, but then it walked away like a person. And so then I'm thinking, is there some freaky guy out here doing something to me? And why is he doing this? And then through the course of that night, something was throwing objects. I never saw what the objects were. I stayed in the tent. Thank you very much. But I could hear them as they were hitting things, as they were leaving, like there's a clearing. As they were leaving this way, and then it'd be quiet, and then it would go on the other side. So something was throwing rocks or pine cones. I have no idea. And
Right.
it would walk over here, throw something, and then walk back. And my dad, he woke up when I squeaked. It was a manly squeak. He woke up and he's just like, was that a bear? And I'm like, I really don't know. And then he went back to sleep. So this ended up happening, weird stuff like this, for a total of 3 nights. The second night, the whatever it was didn't come close. Well, close to way too close for me, but not within like touching distance, certainly. But it did take this, I don't even remember what kind of tree it was, but it was a tree that was about like that big around, and started swishing it back and forth just to be aggressive or annoying or something like that, which is not typically a bear type of behavior. It actually is, I found this out later, primate behavior. It's aggressive primate behavior. And eventually the tree was broken. And the next day I went out to look at this tree, and it was something I wouldn't have been able to break it. I would need a hatchet to take that thing down. So something snapped it. It was just now at the bottom. I'm like, while they were doing this, I think they broke it, but it was crazy. By the third night, I'd had enough. I was freaking out. I had a hatchet in my hand. I couldn't sleep. And I asked my dad, I said, can we please leave? Because it just wasn't fun anymore. Even though the fishing during the day, I kept laughing at myself at how scared I was. And then as night approached, I found myself doing weird things like, no kidding, sharpening sticks and sticking them in the ground like punji stakes behind my tent. Like it, it was crazy. But the end result of all of this was the next time that I went, I didn't really think about it. It was scary. It was freaky. I put it out of my mind. And I didn't think about it until the next time I went out in the middle of the day, got in my tree stand to go bow hunting for deer. And it started to get dark. And I'm like, oh, no deer. And I climbed down. I'm like, why am I climbing down from a tree stand? And it was because I was scared. And I stopped hiking, because I used to hike just for fun. I used to camp alone. I just leave. I'm like, wow, I got some free time. Let's go camping. And I couldn't do that anymore. And that is why I decided I got to take control of this stuff. This is stupid. I let it go on for like 10 years. And I finally decided, you know what? The stupidest thing I could possibly do is face my fears, because this is an irrational fear of a big hairy creature in the woods. Because I started researching, and I'm like, that's not a bear. It's probably not a person, even though reasonably you think, what else could it be? I really don't know. But the issue really is the fact that I started researching, and then I'm like, I'm going on a Bigfoot expedition. Just dumb. It was like when I was a kid, I was deathly afraid of being in front of people. I had this fear.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm going to join the theater. Just attack it head on. And because of that, I then lost some of my fear of being in front of people. Now I'm in front of people every single day as a teacher. But I thought about that. I'm like, that's how I got rid of my fear of people. Maybe this is a great way to get rid of my fear of big, scary creatures in the woods. And man, that took me down one heck of a rabbit hole. I assure you. And it has been a wild ride. And I'm here to tell you, and I know you know this, that the more you look into this weird stuff, the weirder it gets. And the ideas that I had, when I first started this stuff, are vastly different because of the experiences, the things I've seen, the things I've heard, the weirdness full of weirdness. It's just, it has
Oh,
been
yeah.
an interesting ride. And it's, here's the deal. This is a lot of fun. As long as it's fun, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm not making money on it. So that's why it's not a job. It's just, you do it because it's fun. And if somehow you can somehow defray the costs of some of your gear and equipment, great. But for most of us, this is just going to be either an excuse to go into the woods or just a really cool hobby. And I'm still having a blast. As long as I'm having a blast, I'm going to keep playing in the woods until someone stops me.
That's right. And that's exactly how it is for me too. It's fun. It is scary at times. I've had close encounters and stuff. I'm sure you've been scared more than just that too. Tell us how did you get to the BFRO, and how did you get to where you're at now and collecting evidence and stuff? And
well, what basically happened was in doing research to try to figure out what the heck I had encountered, I came across the BFRO's website, and you go to bfro.net and you're just like, click, click, click. And I'm like, oh my. And there's just so much out there. And what it did for me is it made me realize that there were other people that had had similar experiences. So I wasn't the only weirdo out there. There are other people that have had, similar things happen to them. And it's so funny because I was just looking at these things, reading, having a blast. And I'm like, wait a minute. They have Bigfoot expeditions? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I'm like, I'm going. And I did. I'm like this. And how dumb is it to go on a Bigfoot expedition? What a silly thing. God, I love them. Oh my goodness, is it so much fun? And I went on my first Bigfoot expedition near the Mayo area of the Lower Peninsula, and I got scared a lot. And most of it was just because I didn't know what the heck I was doing and I couldn't count. I still have trouble with that. I thought that there were 6 people in front of me, but there were 5. And there was one guy coming up behind me, and I thought I was tail end Charlie, but I wasn't. And that's startled me when I'm just like, wait a minute, there's someone coming up behind me. There's a Bigfoot. No, it was just Bernie. It wasn't Bigfoot. But what that did, it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I met a whole bunch of really cool people, and I realized the first night I slept in my tent without an issue. And I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't been able to do this for years. And here I am looking for these creatures, and I'm sleeping like a baby. And again, it's because I just kind of took charge of the situation. And I said, you can't scare me. I'm coming after you. And that's stupid because I get scared all the time. But I'll tell you, the fun part about going on expeditions is more about being with cool, open-minded people. And that's the stuff that I absolutely love. And so it's so much fun just to sit around a campfire and jaw with other people about, their experiences or just about anything. And you end up, I made some really, really good friends. And then I was asked to investigate for the BFRO. And I'm like, really? Okay. How? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so it was a cool process to learn how to just like how to write up a report so that people are interested in reading it, and then trying to vetting people to make sure that they're not feeding you a line and things like that. But what I found probably the coolest was having an excuse to go out into the woods at random people's properties and saying, you want me to come over and look for Bigfoot? I'll go hiking in your woods. And just having people take me out on their property and things like that was just such a cool experience that people will do that. And that you can build these really cool relationships with people, and then they'll record like I'll give people like these things, like just a random recorder. And I'm like, hey, every once in a while, if you hear anything, you know, just press record. And for a while, I had people all over the state recording for me and sending me these things. And it was so exciting because then I had to learn how to become an audio analyst, and I had to figure out what these things are. I had to also familiarize myself with millions of birds, all sorts of different critters, so that I could figure out what things weren't. And so when you're trying to figure out what they are, and it just became such a fascinating thing, because most of what you hear, like when people send me audio, most of it is something that is probably a coyote, a dog, barred owls. Every once in a while, you get something fascinating like a hybrid, like a coy dog. Those are kind of cool to come across, and animals you're not supposed to have, like when you record like a cougar, and they're not supposed to be in certain parts of Michigan, but they
Right.
are. Yeah,
They definitely
they are.
are.
And same thing with certain types of wolves. They're like, no, wolves don't go down that far south. I'm like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
that was a really big coyote then that sounded like a wolf. All right, and it was a wolf. But that's so much fun to go out and to look for things. And now when I go in the woods, I look at the woods in a different way. Uh, now I'm not now, and here's the other thing. I don't see Bigfoot in everything. All right. And that does happen with people. And I talk to people that I'm in the woods with, and I'm like, listen, if we were out doing a UFO expedition and we were looking for aliens and we saw a flash of a light, that would be an alien, right? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, if we're doing a Bigfoot expedition and we hear a knock, is that a Bigfoot? And they're like, yes. I'm like, there we go. All right. It's because that's kind of what we're looking for. And you got to be careful that you don't make things when they're not. You know,
Right.
a wood knock,
It's a big problem.
might be a woodpecker, you know, and but
Right.
you want to see it so bad, and oh boy, do I get it. And you want to get the next Patterson Gimlin footage, and you want to get a really good picture, and I'm here to tell you that unless you practice, it's really hard to get a good picture of any critter, much less a critter that's moving or when you're in bad lighting. And what I used to do is I kept a camera in my car, and I would randomly say to myself, get a picture of that sign, you know, and I would do things like that just to practice being silly, and in case it ever happened. And I got a lot of pictures of bear and deer and weird things like that. Never anything really cool, but I was ready just in case. But that's kind of that's what got me involved in researching and just having fun with it. And again, a lot of what I do is trying to figure out what something isn't. It's really hard to figure out sometimes what it is, but it's sometimes easier to go, okay, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. What might it be then? And that's what gets fascinating. Just being open to the possibility of any kind of craziness that's in the woods that we just don't understand, or in the skies, or other dimensions and weird stuff like that. It's just fun.
That's
And
right.
as long as it's fun, then we keep doing it.
Yeah, that's right. And that was just great. We do actually have some audio if you want to talk about that, share that since you were
Okay.
talking about this. Any clip you want to do first? I have all of them set up, ready to go.
Throw me one of the titles, because there's one I'm looking for. Is there one that's
One of them's
let's
Goat
see.
Man. There's
That's a
Knox.
weird one.
I think that's
Is there
Cheryl's
one?
clip.
Oh, that's a good one. Is there one that's
The
entitled Werewolf? That one.
Yes. All right, let's play this a few times.
All right. Now,
Awesome.
the reason I wanted you to play that one is it took me a long time to figure out what that was. And it has created a little bit of controversy. And even though it's one of it sounds like an American werewolf in London, frankly. That is a creepy thing to hear in reality. And when you hear it, it takes over the entire woods, and it is scary. I know, because I heard it and it scared me. And the issue is that it's actually a very rare vocalization from a coyote. That is actually a coyote. And the issue is, in the 1970s, there were a couple of similar recordings that have been attributed to Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
Yes.
And they have a similar sound. Paliup and Sonomish, I believe, is the names of them. And
Yep.
and those have slowly, people have slowly realized that those are coyotes also. And they have a similar tone to this. And this one, the only reason that I'm sure it's a coyote is because I heard it after I recorded this, along with real live coyotes. And so I could hear the coyotes yipping, and then I heard this, and I'm like, yeah, I think that's a coyote. It's still scary and freaky, but every once in a while, you get bad news. And the bad news with this one is that I found out what it was, and it's not nearly as cool as if it had been a real life werewolf or a dog man or a Sasquatch. It's a pesky coyote. But
Yeah,
still
let's
kind of a cool recording.
let's take a look at it again. Yeah, at the end, it definitely sounds coyote to me.
Yeah, there's also you catch a little bit of a yip too, kind of at the end also. So it ruins everything.
People don't realize that coyotes have dozens and dozens and dozens of vocalizations, and some super rare that, frankly, we just don't hear all the time. So a lone coyote making those sounds out of nowhere definitely would scare a lot of people, because they assume that coyotes are with a pack, but that's not always true, especially if they're finding mates or separated or on their own.
Yeah, and it's loud, just unbelievably loud. And one of the things about recordings, whenever you record anything, it sounds so much louder when you're actually there, for numerous reasons, if for no other reason than it's a little bit scary. And so your senses are heightened to it. But yeah, that one's just been one of my favorites. So that's why I shared it. Even though it's not good evidence, it's still a data point.
It helps people.
Yeah.
It helps people be aware that if they hear this could be a coyote. And those older recordings, unfortunately, are being proved that they are coyotes. And I know that caused a lot of backlash. But that's what happens, when new evidence comes to light.
Yep. And that's one of the other things that I try to do is I try to, as much as possible, add as much science to what we're doing as we can. And you have to be open not only to things I think that are interesting and strange, but also you have to be open to the fact that, like me, I could be wrong. That happens frequently. So I'm pretty open to that. But when it comes to something that I believe, if it's proven to be wrong, roll with it. I don't, because in any group, you're going to have people who get really into it. And the issue is when it comes to things like Bigfoot, there are different camps, and there are people that don't like each other, and that's just the silliest thing ever. I don't get involved in any of those shenanigans. It's unnecessary. I understand why some people grade against other people, whatever. I try to steer clear of that stuff and just kind of quietly just do random things in the woods and try to show if I do find any evidence, I'm like, here, look what I found, and tell me what it is.
Right.
And it's not going to hurt my feelings if you're like, that's a loon or something like that, because I'm like, awesome. Thank you. That actually helps my research. If you tell me what it is, and I think that would be helpful because it took me a while to get like that. Because when I first started, particularly, I would be offended if someone's like, well, I think that what you've said is silly or something like that. I'm like, but no, I put a lot of thought into it. No, let it go. I mean,
Right.
seriously.
Too many battles to go that way.
Seriously.
So we got some more clips. We got some knocks. We got the Goat Man.
Is there one called, I think it's called Knock and Howl, because there's a backstory to that. Do you have that?
Yeah, it was the knocks. I had to upload them.
That one is cool because of the backstory behind it. For a while, I was working with Animal Planet and the show Finding Bigfoot. And in Michigan, what my job was to try to put the cast and crew in an area where they might have some weird things happen. There might be a noise, or there might be something cool. And I took the cast and crew out, and we went to this location, which I knew, and it was really a cool location. And while we were getting everything ready to go, I was given a knocker, a wood knocker type of a thing. It's a jam block by this wonderful woman named Caroline. And she gives me this thing, and I'm like, I'm going to test it. And so we get to this location, and I hit this wood knocker, which you can hear. It's like and then from in the woods, like, no one knew we were going to this location. It was a spur of the moment type of a thing. Then all of a sudden there's this whoop, whoop. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. That just happened. And then I realized this was in my pocket and it wasn't on. And I'm like, I missed that. But we had our long duration recorder going at that location. So I was able to go back and find it. And that was just so odd, because you don't always get responses to knocks, and things like that. And you certainly don't get howls in responses to knocks often at all. In fact, it's quite rare to get any response to a knock. It's cool when it happens, but when it occurs and it's recorded, oh my. And then what we decided to do is we camped at that location. I was camping with Matt Moneymaker that night, and we stayed there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. That was just showing him the location and everything. And it was really cool bumbling around in the woods with night vision and stuff like that. It was just kind of a cool experience. And I thought it was a darn good show. But it was neat to really hear things when you're out there trying to hear things. It's pretty cool when it all comes together and it gets recorded like that. And so that's just rare. So it was cool.
Yeah. That was a great episode, actually. When my dog first heard those sounds, he freaked out, had his hair all up and just roaming and looking out the windows. And my dad woke up. He was like, "What was that?" He's reacting to a Bigfoot sound. He said, "Okay."
Yeah. Huh. All right. I'll go back to bed.
Yeah. Well, just another day. Okay. But yeah, let's play that.
I'll tell you.
Let's play that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
go ahead.
Please. No. I'm just when it came to like the town hall there, it was a lot of fun. Anytime you do a town hall, because there's so many people there and they're so excited and everyone wants to see Bobo and stuff like that, which is completely understandable. But it was fun to have a just a little part of a television program. It was it was a fun experience. I learned a lot about television productions just in a short little bit of time. We ended up doing 2 Michigan episodes, and so it was just kind of fun to do.
Yeah, it was. Go Michigan. One of the best evidence on the show, in my opinion, because how my dog reacted. He never did react on any other show. So
that's pretty cool.
Let's listen to that 2 more times. Oh, that's so awesome. So awesome.
It is cool when it comes together.
It is. And this is you have another recording too. I believe it's the same area, right? Or different area, but a lot of the same kind of sounds.
Yeah, there's a couple of recordings that I sent you that are from that exact same location. And then there are a few from some others. But all the recordings that I sent to you are from Michigan. And because I just thought that was cool, so why not?
Yeah, that's kind of how I do my calls and stuff and whoops and stuff. Is based off of stuff that you've got actually, because it's from Michigan, and I think you got the most audio that anyone's had in Michigan. Good
I've been
stuff,
very lucky.
I would say yes.
What I will say that every once in a while, what I've done is I've taken this audio and I've call blasted the audio itself just out to see what happens. And I've also done that with the Sierra sounds. And I don't do it with the Sierra sounds anymore, simply because one time we did it when we were in Wisconsin, and it elicited a response that was unpleasant. I didn't see it, but a couple of the people with me started to see some red, what they thought were eyes that were kind of out there, and they had a really nasty feeling. And so I just stopped doing the Sierra sounds, but I will still do the ones that I've recorded and call blast those, just because I'm like, hey, maybe it's a local dialect, and maybe it will elicit a response if those are real, like if those are real Bigfoot recordings, and I have no proof that obviously that those are real Bigfoot recordings. I know the recordings because I made them, but I couldn't see what was vocalizing. And until I can see what was vocalizing, I have no real proof, which is a frustration. I'll keep trying, because I want to see one.
All right.
Because I haven't seen one. I want to see one. And then I also don't want to see one, because maybe under the right controlled circumstances, because there are sometimes I'm more ready than others,
right?
The last thing I want is, going out and because I have property up in northern Michigan. If I'm out there, filling my bucket from the well or something like that, and then I look up, that's not when I want to see one. Or I guess it could be worse, but yeah. So when it's under control, then I'd love to see one. But I guess we can't really control that, can we?
No, it's not, especially when you're asking for it. Then you have to kind of be ready for it.
Seriously.
So. All right, so we got some more. We got got a goat man, and then we got Cheryl's clip, I think.
Okay. Do the goat man. Why not? This one's interesting.
See that. That is interesting.
That's a weird one. And the reason that I added that is because I wasn't there to hear that. That was done with a long duration recorder that I had set out. And basically you set up a recorder with a big battery system, and then you time it so it only plays certain, so it doesn't waste the entire battery and stuff like that. And what I would do is the people on the property would switch out SD cards and check on it basically nightly. And they were having some issues with their goats. Something was not hurting their goats or anything like that, but when the goats were in heat, I guess, I'm not a goat person, which is good. But there would be howls and knocking in the woods when the female goats were making strange bleats, like their noises. And so that's why we started to record there, because we thought, well, maybe this is intriguing to the Bigfoot. Maybe they're interested in these farm animals. And that is a recording from an area that just, it obviously there could be people back there, but it's just a weird place for people to be. And we've recorded other almost talking like audio, and that was almost like talking. It was like this close to like a proto language is what it kind of sounded like to me, which of course makes me think that there was a person back there that was doing it, but we have no proof of that either. But that is just a really odd noise to hear. And this is in a location, that one where that one was recorded, where there have been Bigfoot sightings. And I know people who have stated that they've seen Bigfoot within a quarter of a mile of where that recording took place. And the property owners, who are no longer there, unfortunately, I don't have access to the property anymore, but the property owners had almost nightly experiences with things knocking down bird feeders, things scaring their dogs, all sorts of just random stuff. For a while, they were feeding. This is weird too. For a while, they decided, hey, let's feed these creatures. They called them squishes. That's just what they called them. And they would put, oh my goodness, squashes and things like that on this big blue water drum. And I said to him one night, I'm like, you don't want any wild animal, regardless of what type it is, to get, attuned to the fact that you're going to provide food for them, because then they're going to keep coming and you've got animals, you may want to back off. But we had a recorder set up. So the first night that they didn't feed their squishes, you can actually hear something bipedally walking up to the barrel, and then there's a pause, and then something starts banging on the barrel as if it's angry. That's odd. I mean, that's just weird. What's up with that? And then we had to figure out what was going on, because something in the woods was responding to what they were doing. Now, there were two of them. One would leave the house and go to the barn, and the windows would be open and you'd hear like a knock or different things. And sometimes it was like just a tap, and you're like, what the heck is that? And so they're like, we got to figure out what's going on. And so what we did is I would talk with them and coordinate their movements. And usually I was on a phone talking to them, and we'd have the recorder set out and we'd timestamp it all. And when one of them would leave, what they would get is a response from the woods, like a knock, usually a light one, when one of them would go into the barn and shut the door. Then there'd be which was almost like, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, almost like something out there is keeping a watch and going, okay, she's in the barn. Okay, all's clear. And then when either of them went back into the house, you would hear, this is the weird one, a tap that was relatively close, and then a home run bang in the woods, as if something is just like, okay, they're done with the chores. Now we can move through this area. It just sounded like something was intelligently trying to surveil this area. Now, the reasonable person in me thinks maybe it was a creepy neighbor. You know, maybe it seems odd, but the not normal in me thinks maybe it's something a little bit different, bigger, possibly hairier and scarier. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because they obviously watch us and see what we're doing. In my opinion, they wait for those opportunities. I mean, it's just one more example of them doing it. Let's get to this last clip, and then we'll take a few questions and dive into some more stuff.
all right.
Wow.
That one has quite the backstory as well. That was recorded. I did not record that, and I never went to that location, and it was because the witness didn't want me to come to the location, and so I'm like, no problem. And I never even drove by or anything like that, just because she asked me not to. But
Right.
weird things had been happening, and she thought that someone was in her barn, like living in her barn, and she thought it was homeless people were living in her barn. And because things would be moved around, and that's it. You know, she's like, wait, I put this feed bag over here, why is it over here, and stuff like that. Just simple things like that. But then odd stuff began to happen. She would get she had peacocks, of all critters, and something was taking the peacock feathers, like plucking them from the peacocks, chewing on them, and then manipulating them in a way that kind of would be like almost tying them in a knot, and then would place them at her front door, almost like a bouquet of feathers. Just weird. Now, animals will do this. A cat will do this, and they'll bring like little presents. If you've owned a cat, I mean, you'll get like, hey, thanks for half of a mouse. But this was just odd. And then she started getting, which is weird, pieces of newspapers that had been ripped out, and one was like a ripped out picture of a cat that was set in just a random, well, not a random place, a place that someone who'd been watching this person knew that they were going to go to. And so basically the front door, boop, this weird cutout of a cat. That's just odd. Now that makes me think of poltergeist or something creepy like that. But the other thing is that she was angry because something kept putting these big X logs on these trails that she used to like to walk with her dog. And so she would move these logs, and something would come back and put these big X logs back. And so she's really frustrated about it. And she apparently did it one too many times, because whatever it was that was out there apparently got mad at her, and then pulled a bunch of saplings. She had just planted a bunch of pine saplings, pulled out a bunch of them and put them on her front porch. Like pulled up these plants and said,
wow,
stop being a jerk. And so it's just weird. And then she starts hearing these howls, and she even said that she could hear what sounded like, in her words, a deaf Amish person. I have no idea what that would sound like, but it wasn't, she's like, it wasn't English, and it sounded like someone was trying to speak, but it wasn't English. And of course, ghost hunters are like, disembodied voices, that's a ghost. Hello,
Right.
But it was just weird. And she was able to record. She could never record like the gibberish. And she tried. Like, she'd open up a window when she'd hear it, and she'd put her phone out there, but she was never able to successfully get that for whatever reason, even though she could hear it. So that's kind of odd also. But just a weird situation also, because it was in the southern part of Michigan, in a place that's just not what you'd anticipate. Because in this part of the state, we have metro parks that kind of connect. And this was coming out of one of the metro park areas. So that's kind of cool.
That is the death Amish part. That very sounds kind of like what I heard. It sounds like a death mumbling caveman. And then here in Lower Michigan, there's a lot of reports, in my own experience, that they're pretty much everywhere. I mean, what's your take on the population in Michigan? I think it's up there, in my opinion.
I wouldn't even hazard a guess because I just don't have the data to go on, and I just don't. And so I can only work with what I know. So I really don't know. I've talked to people who can throw out numbers. I can't do it. I'm still working on trying to prove stuff. So that's where I'm at right now.
Gosh.
Still trying.
Yeah. I only say that because of my experiences in Lower Michigan, and they seem to be more populated than in areas where they shouldn't be. They're not up in the Upper Peninsula where it's a wilderness. You expect, there could be a Bigfoot here. Not down here in people's backyards where there's a McDonald's and there's, farmland. But farmland does play a big role because it's a lot of land they can traverse without being seen relatively easy at night. So
there's also parts, a lot of it also would have to do any type of, it doesn't matter if you're a carnivore or an omnivore or an herbivore, you got to have access to food. And you have to have access to food on a pretty darn regular basis. And there are parts of, you get into parts of the UP, and there are some areas that get kind of sparse when it comes to available food sources. Whereas there are parts in the southern part of Michigan where there actually are more condensed food sources available. If I were, like, let's say I was living off of like rabbits and deer, I'd be in my backyard because there's rabbits and deer in my backyard all the time. And I live in Bloomfield Hills, but it's just because there's no natural predators except for like Audis and things like that, that are going to hit them. But no, this parts of Lower Michigan just have a lot of land area where you can have tons of deer. I'm surprised there aren't more bear down here. Frankly, I mean, one was about a month ago, one was hit on 75 near Flint. They don't get much further south on this side of the state. Now, where I used to live on the west side of the state, we'd occasionally have bear in Berry County and Kalamazoo County and stuff like that. But even then, it was pretty darn rare. But you'd think that there's just more food available here for an omnivore like a bear. So you'd think,
yeah,
you're right.
I would, and there's a crop load of deer. There's actually too many deer and big coyote populations we have in the Michigan. You're coming to the conference actually, and you're going to be a speaker there. So we're definitely glad to have you. You're an awesome speaker, of course, and not your first rodeo. I know you've been to a lot of Michigan conferences, and it's where I met you the first time, actually. So,
Well, it's a lot of fun to go to conferences just to see people, and lots of times, just because we all have full-time jobs, there are only certain times of the year that you get to see some of your buddies, and sometimes it's at conferences, and it's a cool gig. If you ever get the chance to speak at a conference, it's fun, and or just go to a conference because you're gonna see cool people, and like take a look at this. I mean, you're gonna see famous people. I mean, come on.
Oh yeah.
And I'm here to tell you, the people that I've spent time with, like Igor, but Cliff in particular, what a cool dude. Like there are just some really cool people that you'll have the opportunity to meet with. But the most important thing about all of it is it's just a bunch of open-minded people. And there's nothing wrong with going out and hanging out with a bunch of open-minded people, particularly if they've had experiences that are similar to experiences that you've had. It makes you seem like a little bit less of a misfit, really, because other people,
Right.
other people
You're
have
not
had those
alone.
experiences too. Exactly. And you can have a cadre of people that understand what the heck is, that you've experienced. And that's one of the things that I do is they would come to me and they'd be freaked out, and they're like, what the heck am I supposed to do? I mean, I've had people say, I don't want any of these things anywhere near me. How do I get rid of them? I mean, I've had that before, and I'm like, exorcism. But usually I'm just like, no problem. Floodlights, motion detecting lights, game cameras, right? Because there was in one instance in the Irish Hills area of Michigan, this woman was so frustrated because something was coming up to it was a garage door, and just slapping it really loud whenever because we were kind of crazy. We used to play humpback whale sounds and call blast them into the woods, and we were able to duplicate infrasound. We used vinyl, and like a old school vinyl, and it was whale along with the sound of waves crashing on a beach, and we threw this out. Now we can't hear it, but we were able to detect that we were actually sending real live infrasound out there. That's way beyond my capabilities. These guys were sound technicians. That was their day job, and so they were blasting this stuff out, and it angered whatever was out in those woods, and it just came and was just hitting the side of the house over the course of a couple of months. And so we set up game cameras and, no kidding, motion detecting lights, and it stopped. But most people are like people like me. I'm like, I'll be there every night, because I want to see and I want to experience it and videotape it. But they just wanted to get rid of it. They're like, I don't care what this thing is, because I'm not going to shoot it. It's too big. Just get rid of it. And I'm like, okay, that's what we'll do. And that's what we did.
And it works. It does work. It's been reported at firsthand reports of you. And we actually got a report of, Bigfoot hanging around the house and knocking on the, kids' windows and stuff. And we had to recommend the same thing. And if it continues, they're probably going to move, is what they said. So I can't even comprehend that if something was messing. And I don't mind if they mess with me, but if something messes with my daughter, we're going to have issues. And we have a good buddy of ours, Val Zavala. He
I know Val.
And of course, he's a data miner. He has all these profile points, and some of it is these interactions of what they do that in human society, that's a big no-no. You don't creep in and went people's windows. You don't knock and scare kids and do things like that. But to them, there's no moral code, at least towards us. I think their moral code would be whatever benefits them and keeps them safe in survival mode. That's the only thing they care about.
Yeah, we're just in the way.
We're just like dumb little toddlers getting lost in the woods, tripping over everything, being loud.
Being loud, that's the thing. That's the thing. Just being, no matter what, you're making a lot of noise. So interesting though.
Yeah, that's right. It'd be super rare to sneak up on a Bigfoot, but most interaction I do believe comes from them choosing to interact with us and doing whatever they want to do in the situation.
You know, I think. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. My apologies.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. The show's about you, not me.
The one of the things that we've always tried to do when we take people into the woods is, you're not, like you said, you're not a ninja. You're not going to sneak up on any kind of critter, right? It's hard enough to hunt a deer. I mean, you got to beat their nose first. You got to beat their eyes. It's hard to do that. But if we're talking about something that may have more intelligence than a deer or something like that, that's a real game changer. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to say, you know what, we're not going to go out and be 100% sneaky. Go out and try to look interesting. Let's go out and see if we can become their entertainment for the night. And so that's why what we'll do is we'll just go out and pretend we're camping and stuff like that, but do some weird things that might not be normal for campers. For instance, that, it's staying up a lot later than normal and things like that, but also the things that you'd expect. But then you add just a little extra flavor, if you will, like knocking or something like that. Now, when you're chopping wood, you're knocking, right? That's a very normal thing. Right. But if you throw in something like a whoop or call blasting or something like that, that might be intriguing, and it might cause a response from the woods. And then if you go out and you walk through the woods, but you don't have a flashlight, that's odd. That's just weird.
Oh, yeah.
And so any animal is going to be freaked out by that. And I mean, just like like you'll bust deer at night that are just, they're like, what the heck is that? I'm not used to, a person being out here at night without a light on. I'm sure that's what they're thinking. But you set up listening posts in weird areas, or you do things that are just odd, like you go down a river in a canoe at night with no lights, which is dumb, but it's and scary, but it's just different, and it might elicit a response. And maybe, just maybe, something will come in closer. And usually whenever I've been out with decent sized groups of people, weird stuff has happened. Now, granted, you're looking for it more than normal, but to get real live knocks or howls that are unexplained in the woods or things like that, that's pretty crazy. And then when you get into the things like lights and crap like that, that's weird.
Oh, yeah.
I get phosphorescent fungus and stuff like that. And I understand if I shine a flashlight into an eye, it will bounce back. But what I don't get is lights in the woods that respond to you and react to you. That I still can't wrap my head around, because that's happened to me on numerous occasions, and I don't get it. But luckily,
what color?
The only ones that I've ever seen are red. That's the only ones I've ever seen. And the only ones I've ever seen, it's in one location, and it was a single red, but it was spread 2 years apart, and it was definitely responding to me in both instances. Once because I ran after it and it ran away, and the other time was it was poking its head around a tree. And I looked at my buddy Larry. I'm like, Larry, do you see that light up there? And he's like, yep. He's like, I've been seeing blue ones over there all night. And I'm like, really? I didn't see those. I never saw any blue lights in the woods, but I see the red ones. And for whatever reason, I've had people tell me that that's not good. And I'm like, oh, Thanks. I'm just like,
Is it the
no,
color? I mean, what?
what they did, like red is evil or something. I'm just like, well,
Right,
I'll tell
right.
you, when I went in the first instance, whatever it was ran away from me and threw a rock into the river, a big rock. The second time I went after it and it ran away. So I'm like, can't be that evil. I'm 5'6" on a good day, and I'm not too terribly like scary, but I'm like, I'm gonna go see what this is. And there were other people, but they were nowhere near me when I took off like an idiot to chase this big red light. And it was so weird because I'm like, was it like this height? And this was in the middle of the night. I'm like, was it like, I was using my light? Was it up here? Was it where? Okay. And then I walked toward it was on a road. I walked off of this dirt road, got toward the woods, and whatever it was still there. I didn't realize that. Then it took off. And that was invigorating because I thought it was gone. And so I'm being all tough and I'm like, let's do a scientific experiment to see how tall this creature was. And it was like, whatever it was like looking at me. And I couldn't see it. It was the middle of the night.
So you're saying you've seen eye shine or eye glowing or actual orb balls?
What it looked like to me, because it was only one.
And you're saying it was running off too, so.
Oh yeah. It was definitely moving and responding to me. What it looked like was as if someone had taken a big cigar and lit it and then was every once in a while puffing on it because it would get brighter and then it would dim a little bit. And that makes me think, oh, you're looking at a radio tower, but it wasn't.
Right.
And again, it was when I approached, in the first instance, I approached this tree where this light was, it ran off and I heard it running through the woods, and then it was not happy with us. Like I said, it threw a rock into the water. And then the next time I was like, I was with another group of people. In both instances, there are other people that saw it. And so I feel better. I only have it on audio. I don't have it on video because it was at night and it wouldn't have made any sense to record. But other people were there and they saw it, and they even saw me try to interact with this red light because, frankly, I made a mistake and I thought that it was maybe one of us had gotten lost and had turned their red headlamp on. But I'm like, wow, that red headlamp doesn't have a lot of juice left in it because it was just barely glowing. Right. And so I got on my radio and I thought it was this guy named Bernie. I'm like, Bernie, you're going the wrong way, because we had told him where we were going to be. And instead of there's like one road that went this way and then it branched and we were on one side, and whatever this thing was just kept going. And I'm like, oh no, Bernie's going to get lost. He's going to end up in the deep woods. And so I'm talking to him and everyone else is watching. And then apparently I made enough noise that it stopped, and it never like turned to look. Like we never got like a flash or anything like that. It was just this red orb. And then I'm like, that's odd. And then Bernie gets on the radio and says, hey, I'm still at the campsite. And that meant that every single person was accounted for, and what we were seeing wasn't one of us. And so that's when I took off again, like an idiot, because I'm like, if this ever happens, I'm gonna hug it. I'm grabbing. And I wasn't scared until afterward, frankly, when I thought that it had run off, because I heard it run. But what it must have done while I was standing there is it only went a little ways, like how a deer will go. A deer will sprint a little bit and then stop.
Right.
But it was closer than I was comfortable when it took off that time, because I'm like, oh my Lord, because had it, instead of going that way, had it come to me, it would have been on me in a second or two. I would have had maybe a second and a half to 2 seconds to respond. And I've been bluff charged by bear before and stuff like that. This was just different. It was different. It really seemed like, this is the weird stuff, like it was just a really big dude. But there was no trail where they went through. And we looked We looked for footprints. We couldn't find a darn thing. And I can't explain what a stupid red light is doing in the woods. I still can't figure it out. But it was responding to what I was doing. And that's what's weird. Of course, ghost hunters are like, it's a ghost. Alien people would be just like, that's an alien.
Right.
I just
right.
don't know. And I've been back there. In fact, one of the episodes of Finding Bigfoot, we took them to that location to see if they could see any light. They didn't see any lights, unfortunately. But I'm like, dude, this is a hot area if you wanna see something. So kind of fun.
That's what can you say? Is it Bigfoot? Is it not? Do their eyes really glow like that? I've seen some in a white orb in the woods. I got a picture of a blue orb from a buddy of ours right there.
Wow.
That's in the middle, right there on the trail. There's nothing there. There's no flashlight. Here's a closer up view. Just a blue orb in the middle of the woods.
Where it's not supposed to be.
Right, or it's not supposed to be. And we've experienced this on an expedition. I've seen one in the middle of the woods in a thicket, and other people have seen it when we had a Chinese lantern up in the air. It flew up and examined it and flew away. What is it? We don't know. It's in the area with Bigfoot activity, because we did have Bigfoot activity. That howl I showed you. That was right before I seen the orb. Maybe 30 minutes before, but same general area, close enough that it's the spot.
And when you get,
what is it?
When you get that type of stuff and it starts to come together, and you're like, the more evidence we get, it should start answering questions. No, it starts throwing more questions at you, which hey, keeps it fun, I guess. But seeing lights like that, particularly when you see something that is behaving in an intelligent appearing manner, it's not just like a lightning bug or something like that. It's like, wait a minute, this thing is doing something with purpose. And that's what's fascinating and weird and keeps me looking for these things, because that stuff's not supposed to happen. Yet when you see it, you're like, is it just me? And it makes it just makes it more fascinating. And that's why we just have to be a little bit more open. And because seriously, if a witness comes up to me and says, hey, I saw this, but there was also this, that's evidence, right? That adds to it. If they're being honest, and you know what I mean, and they're not trying to hoax or anything like that. But if you immediately discount things, like as an observer, if I'm like, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, that couldn't possibly be true, I'm not going to believe you, then I'm doing a disservice. Obviously I have to be able to vet people, but just to use, if I were to just use my bias, I could be missing out on something. And so that's why I'm kind of open to just weirdness. and the more open you are to the weirdness, the more it seems to happen. I don't know if if being open to it draws weirdness to you. I'm really not sure. My wife would probably say I'm just a weird person, and maybe I'm making things up to sound important. I don't know, but no, it's just fascinating to see this weird stuff. The crazy thing also, I talked about some of this stuff with my students, not all of it because they don't need to know, but particularly talking about the new discoveries with UFOs and things like that. NASA's looking into it now, and what have you. Is it terrestrial? Are they extraterrestrial? Who cares? They're behaving in a manner that we don't understand. So it doesn't matter if it's terrestrial, extraterrestrial. If it's terrestrial, who's creating these things and how are they moving, defying physics and the like. I'm going off into another rabbit hole, but but it's just fascinating, and we should look into these things. And if our pilots view things, don't discount what they've seen. Look into it, because it might be a matter of national security or planet security. We don't know. But young
Yeah.
people are really excited about this kind of stuff. And so they ask me questions about all these random things that I'm into, pesky kids, or they just don't want to talk about, Joseph Stalin. They're like, there's got to be something else. Let's get him talking about Bigfoot. Then he'll go for hours, All right. Thanks, kids.
that could be it. Could be it.
Yeah.
Although if I was in that class, I'd talk about Bigfoot. So but you have a YouTube channel. It's called Lord Cryptid, and you post a variety of stuff, some Bigfoot stuff, a little bit of do-it-yourself gizmos and gadgets, survival, off-grid homesteading stuff. You also do historical battles, which is fascinating to me because you go in big detail and it's kind of interactive with your class, and which is awesome content that everyone should check out. So what's your favorite thing to do on the channel? Because you just do so much. Seems like you're kind of everywhere.
It's interesting because I have a lot of videos that I do for my students that aren't public. They're just for my students, and a lot of it is because when we were in quarantine, I was teaching like all of the U.S. history kids in my high school, and I couldn't teach all a couple hundred of them at once, and so I would make videos, and those were fun. And what I realized was your average 14 to 18-year-old has an attention span of a shrew on crack. My goodness. I could get them with an interesting topic, if it was something really cool, for about 12 minutes. And that's about it. YouTube is pretty much the same. If I have a 2-minute and 50-second video, people will watch the whole thing. If I have a 3-minute video, they'll watch 2 minutes and 50 seconds of it. It's just the way it is. But I love doing lessons for my students. It's just kind of a fun thing. And sometimes doing weird things, like showing them, I'm going to make a medieval hand cannon, and I'm going to see if I can blow off my fingers. And then I show them me building a medieval hand cannon, or like I'll build crossbows, because that's what we're talking about in class, and it gives me an excuse to play with my forge, just dumb stuff. But the battles, oh my goodness, I've got 14-year-old kids, and they don't know anything about war. And what I have is about 25 minutes to talk about a battle, including a little bit of background and things like that. And for some reason, these kids listen. And it's just astonishing to be able to grab a hold of these kids. And I'm like drawing things up on the board and stuff like that. And they're into it. And like sometimes I'll actually stop and I'm like, okay, you're Caesar. What do you do next? And it's so fun because they'll like try to come up with what a commander should do or something like that. And so those classes are really cool. What I've started doing a little bit of also is like I mentioned, I have an off-grid property up north, and sometimes I'll be up there. Most of the time I'm up there alone, and I'll set up my infrared camera and I'll just talk and tell like Bigfoot stories, to a campfire, and which is it's just odd because I'm in the, there's no lights on except for the campfire. I'm talking to a camera, just having fun. And every once in a while I will hear some like wood knocks around there. And so of course I grab my camera and I run into the woods and stuff like that to see if there's anything. But of course I'm going to do that. I don't want to mention that though when my wife or daughter are around, because they don't want to know that there's anything. They know that there are bear there, but nothing worse than bear. I'm like, nope.
Right.
No reports at all from this whole part of the state. Nope. Sasquatch free. So
Yeah, that's the hardest part is getting the family to go out camping when they know what you do and what you're looking for. It's like, oh, dang it.
and they're like, don't you play those sounds. Don't you play those sounds. I'm like,
Don't be looking in the woods like that. I know what you're doing.
Are you going to knock on that tree? And I'm like, no, I was looking at that birch, you know?
Exactly.
But no, the cool thing is my wife is awesome. Like she's very forgiving. She lets me do dumb things. She's like, okay, go in the woods. As long as you come back, everything will be fine. My daughter is just like, I'm going to be going to your high school soon. Just don't talk about it while I'm there. Okay. Yes, dear. But they're like, my wife is like, she loves camping, hiking, fishing. She's a better natural shot than I am, which makes me very angry. We go to the range and she's like, ding, ding, ding. I'm like, all right. And I can't even claim to have taught her well because she's shooting better than I do. But she's so much fun to take out into the woods. And my daughter, she'll go hiking. She doesn't like it as much as she used to. But my dog, he loves it. So, but it's just,
that's
it's just
right.
fun. You got to, the more you can get out in the woods, the better, just because we need to get out in the woods, all of us, and then moving around, particularly now. Think that the state is opening up, so there's more opportunity to be out and to get out and do things and not be restricted. So that's kind of cool.
It is. Is there anything else you want to plug? Is there anything special you got people need to know that they might not know about coming up? Things that have happened, stuff like that.
Well, I'll tell you, there the Michigan conference that you were talking about. Seriously, you look at the people that are there, and I'm going to get yelled at because I cannot. I think it's August 9th.
July 17th.
No, I'm talking about it. There's a different one. I know the July 17th.
Oh, that one's
there's
the
another
Upper
one.
Peninsula one.
The Upper
right?
Peninsula one. Yeah. And the UPBSRO is putting that one up, and that one is going to also be really cool. And I should have written down the date, and I didn't. But
I believe it's in August. Yeah.
Okay, because the people that put that on, they're just good people. I've spent a ton of time with like Rich and Don and Caroline and all that, and just really super good people, and Richard also. All right, but and so they always put on a good show also, but no, just take it if you feel like ever going and taking a look at random Bigfoot stories or audio or anything like that. I just have fun with my YouTube channel, and I'm out there looking, trying to find things, and every once in a while I stumble into something that's interesting, and I put it out there because I think it's important for other people to have access to as much information that's out there, and so it's fun. And as long as it's fun, great. As long as I don't have to make a living doing this kind of stuff, then that's no worries. And so, yeah, not really selling anything either. So that's kind of cool.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Jim. It's been an honor to finally have you on. I can't wait to speak with you in person at the conference, hear you speak, and definitely going to have you on the show in the future. So thank you, everyone who's been watching. I really appreciate all the good comments and viewers. We'll be back for another great show next week. And until then, have a good one.